Fun and no difficulty. Thank you so much.
Yes. So, well, it's 3 p.m. We now commence with the webinar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The world is facing the greatest humanitarian crisis since the World War II. In addition to the unprecedented human toll, the pandemic-induced lockdown has triggered a deep economic crisis, unique in what it is a supply, demand, and as well as liquidity shock. Among these tangled situations, let's hear from our experts how they have untangled themselves and what they have done, or to say, what should HR leaders do to emerge out successfully. HRAI welcomes you all to our next HRAI session on Tangle to Untangle, their perspective straight from their experience, rules of next normal. To know more about HRAI and its event, I would request all our participants to visit the link and details posted in the chat window. Request all our participants to kindly follow the guidelines mentioned in the chat window. It would be great to have all the participants' feedback. We will be running a poll before the Q&A session. Request all participants to kindly give your feedback on the session. I now take the privilege to introduce our esteemed speakers for our today's session. Mr. Sahil Nayar, Senior Associate Director, HR, KPMG India, an experienced HR professional whose forte is building an employer brand that help attract and leverage relevant talent. Mondays to Fridays are about driving the entire employee life cycle with exposure to their finer nuance of human resource and its functioning in a growing and evolving organization. He is also a visiting faculty at business schools like IIM and IIT. He is also a core committee member, Mumbai chapter of NHRD. A very warm welcome to you, sir, from Team HRAI and all the participants present today.
Thank you so much, Peter. A pleasure being with all of you.
Thank you. Next, I welcome our speaker and moderator for our today's conversation, Ms. Harini Srinivasan, partner, Simcoe Style Institute, India. A pharmacist turned HR leader, Harini comes with a master's degree in medicinal chemistry from Mumbai University and a master's in business administration from ICFAI, a behavioral scientist and a certified practitioner of various methods. She is adept in unlocking human potential in organization. She has 24 years of successful experiments in the area of leveraging people potential for business excellence, a strong believer in driving one's destiny. She practices resilience as a life skill. Positivity and ability to drive engagement with people helps her be an influencer both to industry and academia. Currently, she is a partner with Simcoe Style Institute India and an advisor to the board of HRAI India Private Limited. She is also a visiting faculty at universities and B schools in India. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am, from Team HRAI and all our participants present here today.
Thank you.
Without taking much time, I now request Ms. Harini to take over the session from here. Over to you, Ms. Harini.
All right. Thank you very much, Peter, for this very generous introduction. And it's a pleasure to be hosting this and a part of HRAI. And welcome, Sahil. You've got a very beautiful background there. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Harini. I think we do it with the whole theme. And I was just thinking that a lighthouse really acts like a wonderful ray of hope, especially when you're tangled and you want to get untangled. So I thought, let me use that as a backdrop, being synonymous with the theme.
Absolutely. And it makes sense because what I had in mind is to, take ourselves out of the typical corporate scenarios, situations, not talk jargons, and keep our typical weekend conversation, and this time in front of an audience. So I thought, let's bring that in, and it's absolutely aligned with the line of thought I had, and let's get started. So Sahil, we keep this going with the flow. Okay, so I'm going to, as usual, keep throwing a couple of surprises at you, but I'm sure you'll catch it and you'll make the best out of it. So,
hope so.
Okay. Right. So as I was talking to Peter and I'm trying to find out about what is the objective of this theme of Tangled to Untangled, what I gathered was that we want to look at situations in the workplace. We want to look at how to deal with problems in the workplace. And the idea is if you have to be able to solve a problem, you have to first go through it and experience it. So I thought, what better way can it be other than picking up characters that we grew up with? Because the whole objective of those childhood stories, the fairy tales and the nursery rhymes, there's a lot behind the words that we read. So if you go back and try and analyze those characters, and I watch a lot of people, I've seen a lot of such characters really coming to life in the workplace. So let's pick 3 of them for today. We have about 40 minutes where we'll talk through about these characters, and I'll love to hear your views and your perspectives on them. So the first character
Definitely. And as always, I was just thinking it'd be great to involve the entire audience through this journey of exploring characters, because I'm sure each one of us who's present with us today will be able to resonate with each of those characters, because in their lives, they would have also had similar experiences.
Yes.
And therefore, as they resonate with it, welcome everyone. If you don't just think it's a general webinar where you need to keep listening to 2 people and at the end of it only ask questions, wherever you feel comfortable, just raise your hand or put something on the chat. Peter will let us know, and we'll be happy to bring you into the conversation so that we co-create this entire space together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very well said. We have a lot of common friends here. And I hope that by the end of it, many more people become friends by actually being part of this conversation. So welcome everyone on this Saturday afternoon. All right. So the first character we pick up is the Pied Piper. Okay. The Pied Piper is someone who has a huge fan following. So if I look at the Pied Pipers whom I met in organizations when I was building teams, when I was handling teams, and as I was leaving organizations, I found the Pied Pipers extremely interesting characters. No matter what the context is, if you have a Pied Piper in your team, and you know that the Pied Piper has actually understood what is the objective of the conversation, what is the objective of the meeting, what is the objective of the initiative or drive that you want to push. And if the Pied Piper has bought into it, and then you know that he will have a fan following and you will have the whole organization following him and making that initiative a success. We've seen Pied Pipers who have taken great things ahead. And we've also seen Pied Pipers who became roadblocks because they were actually piping away in the wrong direction. So I saw a lot of questions which people gave and when they registered, and all of the questions are revolving around how do we deal with going back to the workplace. So obviously there are going to be a lot of changes we have to do. There's going to be a lot of ways in which people have to think a little differently, reinvent themselves and all of that. So what is your view on the Pied Piper's role in teams when we go back to the workplace?
So Harini, I'm sure many people on this webinar have various spans and geographies and different kinds of experiences that they've had in their corporate journey. But if I have to take you back to my early days when I started my journey in the corporate world, as novice as I was, I thought if there is a problem statement, I've understood the problem statement, I've put my best along with the team to create a solution, and I go out there, get in a buy-in of certain business leaders where I'm going to pilot that project, and I have their buy-in. In my mind, I thought that's going to be successful because you've covered relevant stakeholders, you've got inputs, you've not in an autocratic manner managed the whole thing, you've been very democratic, you've got everyone's inputs on the team, and now collectively you're launching a pilot. But as I grew in my career, I realized that a lot of people who say yes in meetings effectively say no in corridors. And that's the entire piping, if I may use that word, that really happens either in sutta breaks, which obviously don't happen anymore, but in the erstwhile pre-COVID era sutta breaks or corridor conversations, or even washroom conversations. Many of us end up huddling in the washroom between meetings to say, oh, the last half an hour of the meeting went this way. In the next 3 minutes, while having a bio break, the next half an hour of the meeting needs to take this turn, and suddenly you realize that your meeting was going fantastic and suddenly it's just toppled all over. So I think it is extremely imperative that we understand, and you may call them pipe pipers, you may call them ninjas, you may call them change agents, you give them what name you want. But if they have a certain clout, it is important for you to be successful, to align or get such people aligned to the larger purpose or thought process, because they can be significant derailers. And while the interest of the organization may be in mind, while the team interest may be in mind, if they are not aligned, I'm not saying they'll be successful every time, but all I'm saying is that the amount of effort that you will need to put in to manage that change, and we all have studied the models of freeze, unfreeze, refreeze, and all of that. I'm not going to get into technical jargon here, but I'm saying the essence of success and wanting success in the way you've desired it to be is not just about getting the plan right. It is also about equally focusing on derailers and seeing how do you really get either those people or those aspects or those processes, more importantly, those mindsets aligned to your way of thinking by helping them see the larger purpose, number one. By number two, helping them see what's in it for them. And most importantly, number three, by being able to co-create with them so that they don't feel that they are bystanders, but they feel they are part of the success of the project. And the moment you do something like that, you won their trust from day one. And when you win their trust from day one, they're going to pipe just the music you want to hear.
Very well said. And participants, if you have anything to add to this, let's keep them coming on the chat box, and we'll be happy to read and reflect upon your thoughts as well. So just keep them coming. So if you get the Pied Pipers align with the larger objective, you'll have them piping in the right direction. Very brilliantly put, Sahil. Thanks a lot. That's wonderful. Let's move on to the second character. The second character is someone whom I've encountered. I won't say it's a very common one, but definitely someone who is worth watching at, worth looking at for behaviors. And that's Mr. Jack, who climbed the beanstalk. So we had these characters. I've had a couple of them in my teams, some of my earlier teams as well. So we had this Jack who would keep watering the beanstalk and watches the beanstalk growing, and it keeps nourishing it till the beanstalk reaches the skies and goes beyond. And no matter where the team wishes to be, no matter what is it that you want him or her to do, this Mr. Jack would climb up the beanstalk despite being told that there could be a demon on the other side, and he will have to muster a lot of courage and will have to gain a lot of muscle to fight with that demon. So you sometimes have these Jacks who want to climb on those beanstalks very, very fast. And they spend all their effort in nourishing the beanstalk, as in their ambitions. They put a lot of effort into it. I would say they're a lot like individual players. They pretend to be part of the team. They pretend to be part of the larger objective. But actually what they're doing is they're watering the beanstalk. And their objective solely remains how he can climb up that beanstalk and get where he has to get to be. So as a leader, now this is also coming from one of the questions which Peter had put in the list, saying, what are the skills that an HR leader should develop to be able to nourish people the right way? So as an HR leader, what should one do if you have a Jack in your team who wants to climb up the beanstalk?
Sure. So I think if I look at your question, it has two parts to it. One is the whole concept of saying, how does the trust coefficient reduce if the entire focus is on only the self, right? Because if you realize that this is my beanstalk, my ambitions, my growth, my promotions, my success, the whole world around is not blind. And they can realize that it's all about I, me, myself. And therefore, number one, of course, they're not going to water the beanstalk. You're going to water it alone. Number two, the place from where you source the water invariably will not change. And therefore, what may be nutrient water today may not be nutrient water tomorrow. What I'm really trying to say is You may nourish your beanstalk for a couple of years, but after a couple of years, the same beanstalk may require different kind of H2O. And that H2O may not necessarily be within your purview, within your access. And you will need people who have different kinds of H2O, read, listen, competencies, skills, ways of doing things, ways of navigating in the organization. And then you will feel at a slight loss because you'll wonder that suddenly this beanstalk that was growing so well all these years with putting the same amount of water every day, today has stopped growing. In fact, is degrowing. In fact, is really getting, in the same manner, and it's not really growing and is just stagnating. And then you'll be at a loss to say, okay, but all these years, the formula that worked for me is no longer working. And then when you go to people, they will realize, oh, you've been Jack. You never took Jill with you. Jill came to you and said, Jack and Jill, let's go together. But you didn't want to climb up the hill and you wanted to go alone. And then the journey and the speed at which Jack went up the hill, Jack is going to come down the hill at the same speed with everyone sitting on the other side of the hill, just seeing Jack go down. And therefore, as a leader, it's extremely important that if you have such team members, how do you really spend time coaching them on these blind spots? Because there are only two ways that I believe things like these work. One, it's a conscious call. So you decide that, okay, I am in it for this and I will do this, right? And the second is maybe it's not intentional. Maybe it's just the place you've been brought up, the space that you've been in, the environment you've been in that makes you who you are today. And leaders have a critical role to play to expose these blind spots to their team members and help them realize that one person can't do everything. And effectively, if it's about teamwork, it's all about everyone's beanstalk. It's about everyone's nutrients, and it's about cross-pollination. And when you do that, of course, we all know the story when Jack and Jill go up the hill, a lot more Jacks and Jills prosper, a lot more Jacks and Jills flourish. And effectively, there is a win-win for everyone. So I think the whole mindset around collaboration, around trust, around working together and winning together. Because when you hunt as a pack, you hunt much better than when you hunt alone.
Absolutely, very well said. So it was interesting how you made the beanstalk story and the hill come together. So it's a beanstalk growing on the hill, and that was nice. Okay, so talking about everyone's beanstalk and nourishing it as a team actually opened up a lot more aspects of collaboration. So if you were expecting a team to work in collaboration as one team and not as siloed individuals, then I think if that's what you really want, then you want trust to be the fabric of the team. If trust has to flow vertical, horizontal across the team everywhere, if trust has to be the fabric of the team, then there has to be the warp and the weft. And to my mind, the very, very useful warp and wefts have been transparency and communication. So if the leader is able to give the big picture and be very transparent, and when I say transparency, I'm talking of unfiltered transparency. In the sense, I often bring up this reference of Shahid Kapoor saying in Jab We Met, ki apni to band baji hai. That level of transparency. And also communicating well enough and not over communicating the right thing at the right time, and enough of communication so that there is no panic, and also keeping the team together. So if you have to build trust as a fabric in the team, if you have to get all the ambitious Jacks working together so that they actually nourish one big beanstalk, and when all of them climb on that beanstalk together, they're able to kill the demon on the other side. So what's your view on building trust as the fabric within the team, especially when you have many Jacks in the team?
What's extremely important is to take 2-3 steps back and understand where does this whole concept or this fuzzy word of trust, transparency emanate from? See, the real challenge is as you go higher and higher in your corporate ladder, corporate hierarchy, it gets more and more lonelier. Okay, And a lot of CHROs, a lot of CEOs, a lot of CXOs have really said this, who've been candid enough to say it. The rest have obviously hidden behind the garb of saying, I've been very fortunate, I've been very lucky to lead a team like that, and all of those wonderful things, which of course is true. I'm not demeaning that, but I'm also saying there's another angle of the whole concept of being lonely. And as you get lonelier, the first most important aspect is to have great amount of self-belief. If self-belief is lacking, you're not going to be able to inspire your team. You're not going to be able to show the lighthouse. And even if you do show the lighthouse, it's going to be a mirage. And that mirage is going to bust the moment you cover distance with time and speed. And therefore, what is extremely essential is three aspects that leaders need to really use as the element of transparency and communication that you spoke about. Number one, earlier times were about taking a decision between a right and a wrong. So either a leader would consciously say, okay, this is the right thing to do, let's do it, and a leader would do it. Or a leader would have a certain amount of what do you call a bias, a desire, a conscious decision of choosing the wrong and take the wrong. Decades later, you had to choose between two rights because the world significantly changed. And now you have A, which is right, B, which is also right. And between these two rights, you had to make one choice. Now, in the current scenario, the way I look at it, I think the difficulty is to choose between two wrongs, because both, in a way, will have some amount of negative impact. And each one of you in your respective organizations, in your roles, will realize that you will feel bad doing stuff that you do, but it is part of your job and hence you need to do it. And you need to do it in the best possible manner so that the impact is minimal. But you need to choose between two wrongs. And choosing between two wrongs is also the whole lighthouse effect, like I call. Because if you're helping someone see the lighthouse, even when it is a difficult decision to make, you're actually giving a ray of hope. And now that ray of hope is about communication, is about transparency, but more importantly, it's about the right intent. Because if the intent as the third element is wrong, transparency and communication will have no space, because people can see through your actions, people can see through your intent. And therefore, I firmly believe that intent needs to be right, communicated right, and transparently. Because when that is done, people will understand that the problem is not them. The problem is something else. And if the problem is them and very categorically told to them that this is the problem with you, they will consciously work on that problem. So that if not today, tomorrow, if not tomorrow, day after, they will become a better version of themselves. And when they start doing that, automatically the world is up for grabs. So I think, to just a long answer to a short question, Harini, but I think the whole facet of trust has a lot to do with intent. It has a lot to do with the lighthouse being where it is and not being camouflaged by a mirage just to create an artificial ray of hope. It also has to do with the whole concept of being transparent and communicative in the right spirit so that the individual gets the message as is, but with a lot of empathy. Because these are tough times. People are not used to situations like these. People are used to, and a lot of us have really seen where people have got 40%, 50% bonuses when the whole economy was booming. And today we are at a situation where we're at the lowest low, right? So how do you really navigate through these difficult times? Requires a great amount of self-belief, a great amount of connect, and a lot of empathy to help people tide through these difficult times.
Interesting. So self-belief and empathy are actually two big takeaways. One is believe in yourself and also learn to put yourself in the other people's shoes to be able to navigate. So actually literally handhold each other and go through. You brought in an aspect of intent, which actually reminded me of another character. It was not in my original line of thought, but then you did steer me in that direction. So I was thinking of this little child in the Emperor's New Clothes, who actually said that the emperor has no clothes on when everybody was saying, appreciating the emperor's new clothes. So if you look at such a character in your team who is able to challenge status quo, then such characters are looked at in two different ways. One is there's always this immediate dropping of jaws, where people say that when everyone is able to see some merit in what's being discussed, why is this person suddenly putting a spoke in the wheel? And that doesn't get accepted very easily when someone is being very, very upfront about a point of view. So that's one reaction that we normally see in team dynamics. There's another reaction that also seems to simmer somewhere is when someone is actually challenging status quo. There could be a few people who eventually start agreeing with this individual and become fence sitters. So there's some amount of equilibrium disturbance that happens in the group, in the team dynamics. So what do you have to say about the child in the emperor's new clothes in teams?
See, the question is the child a child who is a crybaby, or is the child who sees something that others can't see? And I think it is extremely important to differentiate between these two kinds of children. Because someone who is a crybaby can be camouflaged as someone who challenges status quo, but the moment you push that child to say, okay, you don't want to have this, what do you want to have? And the child has no answer. Okay, this solution is not good according to you. You want to challenge status quo, that we are doing this, what we're doing currently in our department is pathetic. Fantastic, I hear you out. Tell me what next. The child falls flat on his face or her face, right? So I think this whole innate ability which some of us have very, very close to our chest, which is about challenging status quo because status quo makes us feel uncomfortable, versus, like you said, fence sitters who find it very comfortable going with the crowd. The ability to challenge status quo, but also you may not have the entire answer. You may not have proof of concept. But if you're able to think beyond the status quo and provide, as I say, a ray of hope in the lighthouse. Maybe you can't see the entire lighthouse, but you can see that small beacon that's just flashing there. And then say, okay, we're moving northwest. We actually need to go northeast. And northeast, so many degrees, right? And then is the ability to influence people in the faith that you have that the lighthouse is actually diagrammatically opposite direction. Now, if you don't have a combination of some of these skill sets, you can get branded as someone who has a problem with everything. And when you have a problem with everything, people are going to eventually just sideline you, not hear you out, because you can't provide perspective or solution. So I think you should be able to not only challenge status quo, which is good because you move from a current state to a desired state, which is a better state to be in, but also be part of the solutioning, because otherwise you're going to just be part of the problem and not going to take the team and yourself anywhere.
Yeah, challenging status quo, once again, it's all about the intent. If the intent is to move to something which is productive, if the intent is to move towards the solution, then challenging status quo makes sense. But challenging status quo just for the sake of challenging, becoming a spoke in the wheel is not where things will move in a direction.
No, and see, more importantly, also what happens is that someone may just have a forte to challenge status quo, right? And may stop there. May not be suave enough to really provide solutions. But the larger challenge is for people to recognize this.
Yeah.
And if you recognize that the skill set of the individual is restricted to only challenging status quo, how do you get a group or a bunch of team members who say your entire job is, just as an example, if Peter is brilliant at challenging status quo, and I know that Ankita, Harani, Chetan, Nash, Tushar on the call today are brilliant at providing solutions, all I need to do as a leader is tag the two and say, Ankita, Harani, Chetan, Nash, Tushar. The moment Peter comes up with a provocative statement or challenging status quo, your job is not to negate what Peter says. Your job is to constructively evaluate Peter's point, because in the last 10 discussions, every time he's challenged status quo, He doesn't have the solution. But 5 of you all come up with a brilliant solution that takes us to a better space. And that is collaboration. That is teamwork, because you're playing to each one's strengths. But otherwise, if you just go and sideline Peter, say, Peter, every time you come up with issues, every time you come up with concerns, every time you come up with problems, but you have no solution, you're actually, as a team, killing a brilliant idea that could be the future.
Absolutely. And I think it also goes a long way where, you facilitate a thinking process in someone who is able to very efficiently challenge status quo. You facilitate a thinking process by which you lead that person to be able to even come up with a solution. That becomes a development area, and it's about the leader. It's all with the leader to help in that. And I think if you, like you said, putting groups of people together also helps in facilitating the others to be able to get into that kind of a thinking process, because sometimes challenging status quo helps.
Yeah,
So,
and because everyone knows their role, right? Because you know that, okay, Peter is someone who will come up with alternate solutions, maybe not thought through, like the whole principles of design thinking.
Yes.
He can think of a prototype, but he can't execute a prototype.
Yes.
Now, if you can latch on to executing that prototype, someone has the idea, someone gives proof of concept, someone executes and develops it. Finally, as a team, you're going to be successful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's where collaboration rests. And before we move on to another favorite character of mine, that I want to spend enough time on that, let's take this one question from Sumit. How to go about it when a team member is not ready to change, and that team member apparently is quite a senior person in the organization? What is the role of HR in such case?
Okay. I think, Sumit, that's a brilliant question, because you brought in the angle of HR. Had you not brought in the angle of HR, it would have been a very straightforward question. To my mind, before I answer this question, Sumit, in your context, in your environment, you need to answer the question, is HR a nanny or is HR the mother of the child? If HR is a nanny's role will be very different from a child wanting to crouch onto a mother. But if HR plays the role of a mother, it will be a significant difference, because then it is a mother talking to a father and not a nanny talking to a parent or a father of the child. And that is the key difference. I don't know whether you've got the analogy, but the whole point I'm trying to say is, the moment you have a situation where a senior leader in the organization is not aligning, or you're having challenges around the fact that a team member is not ready to change, the question is, why is the team member not willing to change? And if the change is around the child in this example, a wife talking to a husband will make the husband change. But if a nanny talks to the father of the child, the probability of the father changing is much lesser. More importantly, can the child tell the father that, Papa, don't smoke, because when you smoke, I can't breathe? And do you realize how this whole equation changes when a nanny tells a father, don't smoke, when a wife tells a husband, don't smoke, and when the child tells the father, don't smoke? And that is where HR can either take center stage and play a very pivotal role as a senior leader and tell a senior leader that, you know what, you are actually not playing the right role, and change is inevitable. But if HR is going to just twiddle his thumbs and say, oh, but senior leader, how can I tell this senior leader? It will impact my job, it will impact my career, it will go against me. And it is between the senior leader and the team member. Father is smoking, daughter is having a problem. I am a nanny, I come for just 2 hours to babysit. Why should I pick it up? I will go and tell the father once. The father doesn't listen, so be it. And that casual approach, the point is, does it hurt you as much as it hurts the team member? And the day it does, and today it could be a team member, tomorrow it could be a senior leader, day after it could be a CHRO stuck in a posh incident when you have to answer the board. Complexities might change, situations might change. The question is, in which shoes are you? And how badly do those shoes hurt? And what do you want to do about it?
Absolutely. Very well said. It's all about how much accountability HR takes about situations like this. And comes out of that comfort zone of playing nanny. Very, very
So
well said.
Harini, I think so, sorry, I just want to comment here as well, right? It's very easy for you and me to say how much accountability HR takes, but I know a lot of friends who reach out to me on LinkedIn saying, we don't feel empowered. We go and tell the top management to do this, they don't listen to us.
Yes.
Right? We have no voice in the organization. And therefore, the question of empowerment can sound very fancy on these wonderful webinars, but if you drill it down, how do you really feel empowered? Does empowerment come from outside? Does accountability come from outside? Does ownership come from outside? Does it come from within? And if it comes from within, what are the challenges or the barriers to exhibit accountability, ownership, and empowerment? Because Sahil may feel very empowered, but in a situation where he goes out, or Sumit may feel absolutely empowered to go and tell the senior leader, this is wrong, you should not do it. And tomorrow, if that senior leader calls up Sumit's boss and says, Sumit, absolutely immature kid. He doesn't even know how to talk to me. I'm such a senior leader. Please coach him. And the boss starts coaching Sumit. Can you imagine what's going to happen to Sumit's self-confidence? Can you imagine what's going to happen to Sumit's ownership? Can you imagine what's going to happen to Sumit's sense of accountability? And then he's going to say, you know what? At the end of the day, ठीक है यार, जिंदगी चल रही है ना, मैं काम कर रहा हूँ ना, मैं क्यों इसमें घुसूं? And that is the imperative point for us to sit back and reflect to say, what is our core job? And how do we move the needle by navigating through the organization dynamics, by sensitizing people, and not just taking ownership or responsibility of feeling empowered, but also influencing critical outcomes.
Absolutely. Very well. So everyone has a role to play. When it comes to empowerment, it cannot happen automatically. Now, if in this instance that you spoke about Sumit's boss, I think it's also up to the boss to be a little non-judgmental and look at things in perspective and facilitate empowerment if the intent is right. I mean, I'm just tying back the intent as well into this. We have another question from Gayatri. So she's asking, when we pay attention to problems, we tend to emphasize, or I think overemphasize and amplify them. Sometimes you start looking at problems with a magnifying glass, but they're not that big. What is your view? How do we scale them off to give an appropriate solution for the problem? That is, what do you do so that you don't end up magnifying or overemphasizing the problem? So can you give some tips of yours around?
Sure. So no, it's not about giving tips or hacks here. I think so. Each one of us are extremely intelligent. I think it's more about perspective. But it goes back to the conversation we had with Peter an hour or two ago, right? And look at the theme of this topic, tangled to untangled, right? To untangle yourself, you need to first acknowledge that you are tangled. If you simply don't acknowledge that you are tangled, what are you really untangling? Point number one. Point number two, Gayatri, there's no need to make the problem larger than life. Many times we do that, and we make the problem larger than life, and then we get soaked into that problem. So I think the objective way is to, one, acknowledge that you're tangled. Two, figure out where is the starting thread where you can start unwinding. And slowly, as you navigate and unwind and twist and turn and figure out where the thread is tangled, you will untangle yourself. But more importantly, look at the problem in a manner in which multiple people are looking at it. Because otherwise, what will happen is only through your lens, you may think it's only one problem. But actually, that one problem could have an impact on 6 other people, creating 6 different problems for them. And many times, if we are not able to decode that, you end up solving problem 1, but you end up aggravating problem 2, 3, 4, 5 on 6 other people because they are intertwined. And I think the ability to figure out how this plays out is essentially how we really grow and mature in our corporate careers.
Thanks. So we have another question, but before that, I'll go to my favorite character, and then we take this question from Preeti. So my favorite character is Mr. Humpty Dumpty. Okay, so we had the Pied Piper going on one direction and carrying his huge fan following, and then we had Jack and Jill, who are extremely ambitious, and they've gathered muscle around what they want to do. So we have 2 distinct groups, and then we have Mr. Humpty Dumpty, who is sitting on the wall, quite literally sitting on the wall and not taking a decision either in favor of the Pied Piper with a fan following or with Jack and Jill, who are having a very concrete plan. I mean, those decision makers who have decided that indecision is going to be their decision, right? So I'm talking of those Humpty Dumpies, some Dumpies who sit on the wall. And this is my favorite character because I've encountered many of them. It's difficult sometimes, they say, to take decisions. So they decide not to take decisions. So how do you navigate through the Humpty Dumpties who sit on the wall? How do you tell them that make a choice, otherwise you will have a fall?
So I think, we've been grown up and we've all heard this story as we've grown up, and we've chosen to believe that not taking a decision is wrong. But in my experience, I've realized that not taking a decision is also taking a decision.
Yes.
You've taken a decision not to do anything about it and just leave it to time. And sometimes when you leave things to time, time is a very beautiful element that solves things automatically. It may not solve it in entirety, but maybe it may be a slightly better solution as compared to taking it head on. Many people say that if there is a conflict, you should get two people together, sort it out, solve for it. But let's realize all five are not the same. And not always do you get a perfect intertwinger. And therefore, it's important to realize that if two people are not meant to be with each other, not meant to work with each other, it's tried, tested, conflict management done, so on and so forth. At times, just leaving it to them over a period of time just solves for it. Because in the whole concept of balance, balance takes center stage. And therefore, a lot of leaders consciously don't take decisions on matters which we may think are priority for us, but they know that with the passage of time and their experience, it will solve for itself or it will die a natural death, both cases. And therefore, they don't prioritize or give enough time or effort to taking a decision in that moment. Because what ends up happening is priorities for people change with passing times. And as priorities change, today what may seem very urgent or important, tomorrow may go 10 points down in the list and may automatically solve for itself or die a natural death. And therefore, Humpty Dumpty sitting on the wall at times is also all right. It's nice to see someone just sitting there, relaxing, feeling comfortable, and just being there. And while the rest are all running all over the place, up the beanstalk, down the mountain, everywhere else.
Sometimes it is decision of indecision is the right decision. That's what you're trying to say. So yeah, well taken, well taken.
That was almost like a tongue. That was almost like a tongue twister. I think so. The next webinar you do, Harini, should be on this.
Okay. All right. So Preeti has a question. How do you deal with? She has a situation actually. That's what I understand. So correct me if I'm wrong, Preeti. How do you deal with a situation where juniors display competition with seniors to prove that they are better than their seniors, especially in front of their super bosses? So how do you create a healthy environment in this when juniors compete with seniors to show off in front of their super bosses?
The question I have in my mind after listening to this is why? Preeti, why? Why? I don't know which situation you're in. I don't know whether you're the junior, you're the boss, or you're the super boss. I don't know which situation you're in. But after hearing this question, what comes to my mind is why? Why would you need to do that? And what would you achieve by doing it? If you are a team member and you want to outsmart your boss in front of your super boss, is there a reason? What is the trigger? What's the factor? If you are the boss where your junior is trying to outsmart you, why? And if you're the super boss who's encouraging this behavior, why? So I think I don't want to prescribe medication for a problem that I don't know. And I want to get my diagnosis right. So my limited point is, let's answer the why first. Because when we get to the why, automatically the perspective and the answers will change.
I love this answer. I just love this answer. The why here is particularly important because on a serious note, what we normally, I mean, a lot of times I've seen happening also in such situations is without looking at the why, people start jumping into action. And that's where the problem really becomes much larger than what it is. So on a serious note, I just loved your take on this, that it's, you sit back and answer the why.
And I also come back to answering the why to a certain extent, right? You can have two schools of thought, and this is something that my father taught me earlier on, right? You can either trust someone and trust everyone unless they break your trust, or you can actually go out and not trust anyone. Now, which space are you operating from? If you're operating from the space where you don't trust anyone, and over a period of time, you have to win people's trust, or they have to win your trust, that is one kind of personality. The second kind of personality is about people who trust everybody unless someone breaks their trust. And in these situations, just using this as an X and Y axis, you will start plotting people on a scatter chart on really saying, if I have a team member, a boss, or a super boss, and the person is operating on the X axis or the Y axis, where do I really plot them? And if you superimpose intent on trust, you will find out where the real problem is. So I'm sorry, I'm complicating it a bit with diagrams and 2x2 matrix. But if you just simplify it, it's a very, very simple equation of answering the why.
Very well said. Now, Raghunandan has a question here. I am a little lost in this question, but let's try and decipher. Otherwise,
maybe we can just have him unmute himself and ask the question.
Yeah.
Let's do that, yeah.
Raghu, you
Raghu?
can.
Yeah? Raghu, why don't you come on video? Let's hear you.
Yes. Raghu?
Raghu, you can unmute yourself.
Yes. And come on video as well.
Hi, Sahil. Hi, Hari.
Hey, Raghu.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Yeah, great. Fine. So here's the situation. I think I really enjoyed the three characters, what Harini said. And I think probably, yes, we all have come across these characters. So here's the situation where you are a Pied Piper and you have been basically carrying across, and suddenly you have someone coming in and who wants to get into the Pied Piper shoes, and there's a power struggle, and they believe that, okay, fine, you are influencing, you are inspiring, and at the same time we have other two characters, Jack and Jill as well as Humpty Dumpty, who are there in the scenario, who doesn't
Raghu,
want
it
to
seems
tell
you're
you.
just summarizing the entire webinar into one movie plot.
Okay.
All the characters are in it.
Fine. So how do you ensure that there is a trust factor which is existing in the team? Sahil.
Raghu, very simple. You've played Mario?
Yeah.
Now, when Mario actually has the mushroom, what happens to Mario?
I mean, so ultimately you consume it.
You consume it. What happens to Mario after he consumes the mushroom?
I mean, that you have to say that.
Okay, so Mario becomes big. So Mario is
Yes.
small.
Yeah.
Mario has the mushroom, he becomes big. Okay. Now, the first time I played Mario as a kid, I never knew that if Mario goes and hits somebody, he becomes small again. And when he hits someone again, he becomes even smaller. And if he goes next to the flower, he again becomes smaller. And when he jumps over something, he maintains the same size. And when he gets a gold coin, he earns points. And when he hits a brick, some bricks have multiple gold coins. And this is about the facets of interacting with human beings. Today, Raghu, I may operate from a space where I believe that every human being is God's child on earth. And I'm not being philosophical here, but I'm just saying every human being is God's child on earth, and there is some good in Raghu. Can I go out and figure out what is the good in Raghu, connect with the goodness in Raghu, and build a lasting relationship with him? Or
Exactly.
do I say that, oh, Raghu is asking a question and putting all the characters into one story and trying to put me on a spot, and therefore I don't want to answer his question and I will deflect it. Many leaders in organizations deflect a lot. And
Correct.
Deflecting is also a manner of solving a problem, because a leader is not expected to have answers to all the situations. So coming back to your question on trust, coming back to your question on intent, how do you really know that if you touch a flower, you will go half in size? If you touch a mushroom, you will get more power and double in size. Because today, what may appear as a mushroom may actually be a flower. And I really love what Captain Raghuraman says. When you listen to him on various of his YouTube channels and his seminars, his favorite pet line is to talk about saying, when he was in the army, he knew where the enemy was, and therefore he knew where to shoot.
Yes.
But in the corporate world, you don't know where your enemy is, and therefore it becomes even more difficult. You don't know where to shoot. So you don't know whether what is appearing like a mushroom may actually cut you into half size, and what is appearing like a flower may actually give you more strength, more resilience, more power. So I think, Raghu, long answer to a short question, we need to figure out and get our sensing and our experiences with people, form our own judgments, and decide how do we want to interact with people, which really helps us get the intent right, get the trust right. And therefore, as I said, you can either go out saying you trust everyone until you get betrayed or hurt, or wait till people actually win and earn your trust. Choice is yours. I'm not going to prescribe anything, but I'll offer you these two solutions to look at.
Thanks, Sahil. Got it. I think, I mean, it's everybody's problem. And I do understand that there are a couple of people here on this webinar who basically got the message.
Fantastic. Thanks for asking that question.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining in, Raghu. It was good to see you, although you refused to turn on your video, but it's good to see you. Samrat has a question. Samrat, you can unmute yourself and voice your question, please.
Hey, Sahil. Hey, Harini.
Hi.
Hey,
It's a
Samrat.
pleasure. It's a pleasure listening to both of you. I think you guys are fantastic. The way, and it's the first time ever I heard a webinar like this where the characters have been resonated so well. And thank you so much, first of all. Now, the question I have for Sahil, Sahil, as you rightly said, the analogy was fantastic and fantabulous. Great to hear from an HR leader like you. However, I think being HRs, you know what are the things, where to stop, and probably not to give the answer in totality. The question I'm referring to what Preeti has asked, when a junior is probably outsmart the senior in front of their super bosses. First of all, the question is why? Now, if the why has been answered and you think that your capabilities are not being recognized or acknowledged, but there is always a barrier because you directly do not jump the gun, you do not overpass, or you do not surpass your boss and go and try to showcase your talent or your work that you're doing. Sometimes there are two options. One, it has been taken away by the boss. Sometimes the boss does not even recognize it, and it does not even reach the super boss because the boss is extremely busy. But you've really done something which has a return on intention, not technically a return on investment, but a return on intention. So considering that when an individual has given it a thought to even outsmart their superiors, which probably not to be taken in the negative way or in any other way, do you think the person is still doing it wrong? Because he has a motive, not for himself, for the team, by the team, of the team, and for the organization.
So Samrat, let's look at it this way. Good question. I think so. You've articulated it very well. Go back to the why, right? And let me do a little bit more deep dive since you requested me to do a deep dive on this question. If there is a team member who's feeling frustrated, choked, because the boss is insecure, because he or she believes that he or she is more intelligent than his boss, there are multiple ways to bring this across to the super boss, and not just the super boss. There are multiple stakeholders who see, observe, comment, share, right? And therefore, what's going to happen over a period of time is, while the boss may be very successful in hiding this talent from the rest of the world or taking credit entirely for the work that the team member has done, over a period of time, this brilliant talent will get exposed to the world. People will know that the ideas, the suggestions, the implementation has come in from this team member. What ends up happening most of the time that I have seen of people that I coach is the frustration levels increase to such an extent that then they want to break free, they want to break loose. And in the process of breaking free or breaking loose, they end up breaking protocols. And when they end up breaking protocols, that becomes the easiest way for the boss to highlight aspects where behavior, conduct of this team member is not in line with the values, not in line with the intent, not in line in the spirit of collaboration. So my entire suggestion to anybody who's having something like this is to be able to realize the ability to navigate, carry your boss along, make your boss look successful so that you are successful, and eventually have a win-win situation. Over a period of time, everybody, trust me, you can take this in writing from me, every single human being hits their level of incompetence. It could be a CEO, it could be someone running the country, it could be someone running a NGO, wherever. And that level of incompetence is a very thin line which isn't visible, which in many times isn't described, which is not in your role profiles, which is not in job descriptions, but which is in your own head. And when you realize that, if you transition from your core role to playing politics, because that helps you blur that line, then the whole story changes, the whole storyline changes. And then you need to start equipping yourself to be able to navigate organizations that are very political. But otherwise, if it's just about core work and competence, definitely it will come to the forefront. And patience as a virtue is key for the team member. Realization for the boss is important to carry the individual along, because the boss effectively will start leading and not working directly. And therefore, the roles become very different. And if, as they say, right, the best bosses in the world say, I'm only as good as my team. And when the team is better than the boss, that's absolutely all right. As they grow, they will grow, but the boss also needs to grow, because if the boss doesn't grow and the team keeps growing, effectively the team will take the position of the boss. So I think it's very convoluted to that extent, because it's all about human dynamics. It's a lot to do with behavioral science. If you spend some time reading about talent economics, it's a lot to do with that as well, because in these challenging times, every penny counts. And the whole concept of economics playing out in terms of not just ROI on individuals, but even EVA, which is economic value add, plays out significantly. And it is bound to get exposed over a period of time. Samrat, I hope I've been able to answer your question.
You did. Thank you so very much. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Samrat. So we are almost towards the end of the hour. So I just wanted to quickly summarize all the things that Sahil said. And the last character which came to my mind as I was listening to Sahil speak is, and it's also related to the theme, which is that of Rapunzel. So all of us, instead of feeling victimized and feeling like we are locked up in that tower in which Rapunzel was, I think by using these very simple methodologies, first of all, keeping things simple is one of the biggest messages I think Sahil gave here. That's a great takeaway. Keeping things simple, let things take its time when it needs to, not push unnecessarily, go with the flow, be empathetic, not play politics where it's not required. Keep things simple is the best way to untangle yourself like Rapunzel did, and cut off those stresses of all these things that one game people need not play, and lead a normal life after that, absolutely untangled. Thanks very much for this wonderful conversation, Sahil. It was absolutely impromptu, non-scripted as usual. But this is how typically conversations happen, where we have become from, like I said in that small video clip, we come from very, very diverse backgrounds, but we have a converging line of thought. And I hope we've been able to get the convergence as very crisp takeaways for everyone. And this is me signing off from my role as moderator here, and over to you, Peter.
Thank you so much. Before Peter comes in, Peter, if I may just take 30 seconds, because we wanted to do some justice to Rapunzel, so she shouldn't feel bad that she's up in the ivory tower and we've not done justice to her character. So think about it this way, right? And while Harini was talking, I was just thinking, Rapunzel, look at it from this perspective. You have a 2x2 performance potential, right? She's sitting right up in the ivory tower. She's right here, okay? Now she has a choice. Either she can come all the way down and then move here and see the lighthouse here. Or if you're anyway very high on performance and you want to exhibit potential on the other axis, how do you, sitting at the top of one tower, look at the lighthouse, which is on the other tower, and the beacon right on top? And if you can cover that journey as a straight line, as compared to an axis line going across, you don't have to really come down. And while it may sound hypothetical of moving tower to tower in mid-air, which I'm sure will happen one day as well, and you won't have to just skywalk, but more importantly, how do you really, when you go through lows in your career, not just sit down and create self-doubt or hit your level of incompetence, but also find out which is the next big area, which is the area where you can develop great amount of potential and match performance, rather than let performance come down, someone pull you down on your weaknesses, someone pull you down on areas that you're not strong, and then force you to reinvent yourself. So continue being at the ivory tower, have vision of the lighthouse, very clearly look at performance potential, and more importantly, keep playing to your strengths as you go ahead and explore the next big area of potential, where, of course, performance will follow suit. With that, thank you so much, HRAI. Thank you so much, Harini. Thank you, everyone else. Thank you, Peter, for having me over.
Thank you so much,
back to you. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Ms. Harini, for taking us through this insightful conversation and a journey that unveiled different characters and perspective. Thank you, Sahil, for sharing your perspective and insights, which I'm sure many of our participants here would have benefited. Before we conclude with today's session, we would also want to thank all the association, Geisha, NASSCOM, COE, Bharat Nirman, and LMA for supporting HRAI and its event. To know more about these associations, request you to kindly visit the links provided in the chat window. Thank you once again, dear speakers and our participants, for joining us today. Do join us for our next webinar on connecting the dots on the 20th of August, 2020 on the topic, the reset, reality or myth. Request you to kindly register for this event at the link mentioned in the chat window. See you soon. Stay safe, take care, and bye for now.
Mr. D'Souza, all the best. I saw you on this webinar as well. Wish you all the very best for your upcoming session on the reset.
Jonathan, now you know what the secret was.
Jonathan, are you there or you logged off? Okay, maybe he's logged off. Okay, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Fun. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye. Take care. So thank you, dear participants. We hereby sign off from this webinar. Thank you.